Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The desert didn't speak, it waited. Red Mesa sat quiet under a cold New Mexico sky, the kind of night where even a breath sounded loud. Natalie Cross lay prone behind a jagged ridge, cheek settled to the stock, scope steady, heartbeat slow. 200 yards behind her, the team spread along the rocks in a loose fan. Ethan Rourke crouched with his binos and that permanent crease between his eyebrows. Luke Hanley guarded the rear, eyes wide, too young to hide his nerves but smart enough to keep his mouth shut. Radios were low. Footsteps were lower. Everyone let the wind do the talking. Fort Halstead had flown them out hours earlier, quick briefing, quicker wheels up. No speeches. Rourke didn't waste words when he had a sniper like Nat on the board. The target compound sat far across the basin, a rectangle of concrete and bad intentions. Floods washed everything white, then black, then white again. Guard towers clocked lazy arcs. Every sweep looked routine until it didn't. Nat read mirage shimmer, skimmed wind curl off the southern wall, noted the way sand devils stalled, then fell apart. She logged it all without thinking. It was just how her brain ran. "You good?" Rourke asked, voice barely above the grit under his knee. "Good," she said. Nothing else. He knew better than to push. Luke slid into position next to her, past a small slate. Weather notes from the mini-station they'd planted on the ingress. Nat glanced, adjusted a half-click, went back to glass. The balcony was empty. It wouldn't be for long. Intel said their window would open after shift change, maybe 60 seconds if luck felt generous. Nat didn't bet luck. She ran numbers. For a second she saw another range, no desert, just a frost line in Montana and a man in a faded field jacket beside her. Robert Cross didn't raise his voice, didn't praise much, didn't need to. "Breathe between the beats," he'd said, tapping his watch. "Don't fight the wind. Read it, then agree." She was 12 then, too stubborn for compliments, too hungry for clean shots. The memory came and went like a small, solid weight in her chest. She pushed it back where it belonged. Rourke checked time. 2 mics. "Copy," Nat said. She scanned left to right, built a mental image of every door, light, shadow. Her cheek well didn't move. Her barrel didn't tremble. Red Mesa breathed around them. "Hanley," Rourke murmured, eyes on the east track. "I got it," Luke said, steadier now. A door opened on the balcony. 3 silhouettes stepped out, talking like men who owned the night. Nat didn't blink. She mapped height difference, gait, posture. The center one turned his back to the rail. The left leaned forward, elbows on concrete. The right paced, half hidden by a pillar. Not ideal. Not a problem. Wind eased, then edged again, a thin push from the northwest. She adjusted. The world narrowed to reticle, drop, drift, and time. "Window opens on your word," Rourke said, and even he sounded like he believed it would. "Hold," Nat said. A guard below wandered into the cone of light, lingered, looked bored, moved on. The balcony men kept talking. Nat found her calm. It wasn't pride. It wasn't adrenaline. It was math that felt like breathing. "Why is it always the quiet ones?" Luke whispered. "Because they listen," Rourke answered. Nat eased a breath and let the top half go. The trigger wall met her finger. She waited for the wind to settle into the pattern she tracked for the past 10 minutes. It always made the same mistake before it rested. There, small dip, then a click of stillness. She marked it, stored it, didn't take it. Too early. The pacer stepped clear of the pillar, then back again. She tracked his rhythm. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. People were metronomes when they thought they were free. Cross? Rourke asked. Almost, she said. In the periphery, convoy engines grumbled somewhere behind the compound. That would shrink their window if it arrived early. Rourke keyed a quiet update to the far element. Nat didn't listen to the traffic. She watched the pacer's foot. On the next pause he stopped longer, pulled a cigarette, cupped the light. The flame drew a bead as neat as any laser. The left man laughed and turned his head. The center one lifted a glass. The wind exhaled and went flat. Now, Nat said. Her first shot left and reached before the laugh finished. The second broke on the exhale and found the glass lifter square. The third threaded the gap the instant the pacer leaned out to flick ash. 3 sounds, but not really, more like one decision written 3 ways. On thermal, bodies dropped in sequence the way dominoes agree to fall. Silence held, then the compound erupted. Sirens, shouts, lights clawing the night. Rourke didn't say, "Good shot." He just tapped her shoulder. "We move," he said, and the team flowed backward the way they'd come, quiet, clean, professional. They slid into shadow and cut across a dry wash. Luke's breath hitched once, he caught it. Rourke scanned their rear and gave a single nod Nat felt more than saw. She packed the rifle like a ritual and kept her eyes on the dark horizon. The job wasn't glory. The job was leaving without footsteps. Back at the exfil notch, the bird came in low and mean. Rotors shoved the desert away. Nat climbed in last. Rourke met her eyes across the hold. Nothing showy there, just respect, finally simple and uncomplicated. He lifted 2 fingers, "We're not finished." She knew. Fort Halstead would have questions. People with stars would have more. Somewhere far from Red Mesa, a different door would open. Someone would say a new word she hadn't heard yet, Specterline, and swear it was about training, not control. For now, the desert was behind them, and the night went quiet again. The Black Hawk dropped into Fort Halstead before sunrise, rotors chopping the last of Red Mesa's dust off their gear. Inside the debrief tent, the air smelled like coffee, canvas, and nerves. Rourke stood at the head of the table. Nat sat straight, hands flat, eyes steady. Luke kept shifting in his chair until Rourke gave him a look that pinned him still. Screens showed grainy drone footage, 3 figures on a balcony, 3 collapses, 1 clean exit. No collateral. No chatter. Just math that turned into results. A pair of analysts asked the same question 3 ways. Range? Wind call? Time on trigger? Nat answered without attitude. 2.7 seconds between first and third. 0.7 right drift on the second. Drop corrected by memory from the Mirage shift off the south wall. They typed faster but seemed to understand less. One finally muttered, "Doesn't add up." Rourke closed his binder. "Then fix your math." That ended it. They should have been dismissed. Instead a captain Nat didn't know stepped in and asked Rourke to bring Cross to a follow-up. Different room. Different tone. Glossy seal on the wall. General Marjorie Whitfield waited at a long table with a flat smile that didn't bother reaching her eyes. "Lieutenant," she said, "impressive work." Compliments didn't move Nat. She nodded once. Whitfield slid a file forward. "Your results align with an initiative we've been expanding. Project name is Specterline. Advanced Precision Training, Neuroassistive Overlays, Decision Timing Models. We need an instructor with repeatable instincts." Nat heard the word that mattered. Repeatable. "I'm a sniper," Nat said. "I teach when it helps the mission. Not when it writes a theory paper." Whitfield's smile held. This is operational. Blue Ridge, Virginia. Limited staff, high clearance. Short rotation to start. Her gaze cut to Rourke. Commander, recommendations? Rourke's jaw flexed. He didn't like being cornered in his own house. He also knew the game. She delivers under pressure, he said. But you already read that in the report. Whitfield's brows ticked like a clock. Then it settled. 2 days later they flew east. Fort Halstead vanished behind a wall of Nevada sun, replaced by long shadows of Appalachian forest and a narrow access road that pretended to be nothing. Specterline didn't look like a base. It looked like a rumor poured into concrete. Gates unmarked. Guards without patches. Doors that opened only after a hesitation you could feel in your teeth. Inside, the light went cold and the sound went thin. A technician scanned Nat's retina and handed her a badge that had no name, only a number. Instructor, 07. Rourke's badge said advisor. He didn't comment on the difference. In the main range, 10 shooters lined behind long guns with cables running from their neck harnesses into black modules humming on a rail. A man in a lab coat tracked their vitals on a wall of monitors. Dr. Mercer, the escort said. Mercer looked up with a tired half-smile, the kind you wear when you've argued with your conscience too long. Welcome to the future, he said. Or the thing that wants to be it. Nat watched a drill. Wind correction 2 degrees northwest, an instructor called over comms. 10 rifles fired in a perfect chorus. 10 hits printed center mass on moving targets out past a mile. Clean. Too clean. No chatter. No cussing. No human bounce. Luke would have said something funny right there. These shooters did not. Mercer walked beside her. We profile microtremors, respiration phases, blink rate. The system nudges when the human curve strays. He said it like a report and like an apology. Nat kept her face neutral. Nudges or overrides? Mercer didn't answer. They introduced the candidates. One made Nat's chest tighten a notch, Cole Jensen. Younger than she'd like to see in a room like this, but the eyes were sharp. He stood easy until the harness clicked at his neck. Then something dimmed, like a light put behind a curtain. Later, on the side range, Nat took him through wind reading without cables attached. He tracked mirage and flag lag like he'd been born to it. He smiled once when he nailed a tricky hold. It looked real. It didn't last. That night, Nat couldn't sleep. Rourke found her in a narrow hallway staring at a window that only reflected the room back at itself. Thoughts? He asked. They want to scale instinct, she said. File it, model it, pump it back in. We've seen worse ideas, he said. Not with this tone, she said. This feels like replacing, not teaching. In the morning, Whitfield gave a tour that wasn't a tour. Words like optimization and throughput floated over equipment that hummed too steadily to be harmless. Mercer kept near Nat without acting like he was keeping near. In the observation bay, a test went sideways. Cole's pulse spiked on the monitor after a near miss. A tech reached for a control and the readout flattened in 1 second like a snowfield pressed by a plow. Cole's hands relaxed. His face went empty. He fired. Bullseye. Nat felt the wrongness crawl up her spine. What was that correction? She asked. The tech shrugged like it was nothing. Stability feedback. Mercer's jaw ticked. It's supposed to be micro. Nat stepped closer to the glass. Cole set the rifle down with movements that belonged to a video loop. When he blinked back to himself, he looked around as if he'd woken up standing. She met Rourke's eyes. He didn't blink. After lunch, Whitfield brought Nat into a small room with a map of the Blue Ridge and a document marked with more black lines than words. We'll expand to a second cohort, Whitfield said. Your methodology becomes doctrine. We'll brand it as discipline. The public will never hear it, the field will feel it. Nat kept her voice level. My methodology starts with choosing. You're sanding that off. Whitfield's smile dropped a half-inch. We're saving lives by reducing hesitation. Nat thought of Robert on a frost line saying don't fight the wind, agree. She also thought about agreeing with a machine. That evening, she sat across from Mercer in a quiet lab, the hum of servers like insects trapped in glass. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I used to think the line was clear, he said. Measure, don't move. Now the line keeps moving. Nat nodded. Then stake it down. He slid a drive across the table with 2 fingers. You didn't get this from me, he said. System schematics. Command hooks we're not admitting exist. He looked sick when he said it. She palmed the drive. Why me? Because you still look human after the shot, he said. And I'm not sure that's allowed here. She stepped into the corridor. Somewhere down the hall a door locked with that half-second delay that felt like a held breath. She tucked the drive into her sleeve and walked back toward the range where Cole waited for night drills. On a high screen above the lanes, the Specterline logo pulsed, thin, white, clean, as if control could be polite. Outside, the mountains were quiet. Inside, the quiet had rules. Natalie learned them fast, eyes forward, questions short, feelings filed under later. Specterline ran like a metronome, every drill stacked on a clock that never missed a beat. She taught wind calls without cables and watched Tex clip the harnesses back on the second she stepped away. Cole tracked like a natural until the line went live, then a shadow crossed his face, small but wrong, like a screen dimming half a notch. Mercer kept notes and kept his mouth thin. Rourke floated between labs and ranges with advisor stamped on his badge and worry stamped everywhere else he couldn't hide it. She tested the system by asking for small human things. 5-minute breaks without the harness. Dry fire with nothing plugged in. A day to drill fundamentals in the woods. Whitfield approved the first, delayed the second, ignored the third. Throughput, she said. We're here to standardize excellence. Nat nodded like she'd heard something reasonable. Later that night she sat at a terminal and wrote a clean, quiet report. Conditioning appears to suppress adaptive judgment. Micro-overrides are trending into macro. She sent it up 2 channels. In the morning the report wasn't there. Not received, not pending. Gone. When she asked IT, the answer was a shrug and a phrase she didn't like, retention policy. By noon, a memo slid under her door. Effective immediately, all instructional notes will be routed through command review. No signature. No letterhead. Mercer found her reading it and sighed without making a sound. They've started sanding, he said. You feel it too. I feel it everywhere, she said. You still have that drive? His eyes flicked down the hallway, then back. Don't lose it. The demo came at the end of the week. Whitfield brought a small audience in suits. The range was scrubbed until it gleamed. 10 shooters, 10 harnesses, 10 targets moving on a randomized path at distance. A voice in the overhead cracked off instructions with theater timing. Nat stood with Rourke behind glass. Cole took lane 3. His vitals ran on a strip above the booth, pulse, respiration, micro-tremor. They all looked like textbook until one target zigged early and Cole missed by a hair. His pulse spiked. A tech touched a control. The line flattened like someone ironed it. Cole's eyes went glassy. He fired again. Bullseye. Nat's throat went tight. She put her hand flat on the glass. That was an override, she said. Mercer didn't argue. Rourke's jaw set. On the next cycle, everything held, until it didn't. Cole's third target shifted behind a partial barrier. The system should have called a hold. Instead the harness buzzed, subtle but there, and his muzzle drifted off target, past the berm, up toward the gallery. For half a second his aim found the observation deck as if drawn by a magnet. Nat didn't think. She hit the dead man on the wall and dropped power to lane 3. The lights flickered. Cole blinked hard, like surfacing from deep water, and his barrel sagged. The suits didn't know what they nearly were. Whitfield smiled too slowly. "We'll note the interruption," she said. "Equipment variances are normal during expansion." After they cleared the room, 2 guards escorted Cole to medical, for recalibration. Nat stepped in front of the door. "He's a shooter, not a sensor array," she said. One guard said, "Ma'am, orders." Rourke arrived in time to stop a collision neither side wanted. He put a hand on Nat's shoulder, a pressure that said fight smart, not loud. Whitfield's voice arrived from behind like winter. "Lieutenant Cross, if you prefer a different assignment, say so." Nat kept her face still. "I prefer shooters who choose." "And I prefer instructors who execute," Whitfield said. "We'll table philosophy." That night Nat found the med wing dark except for a nurse at a desk who pretended not to see her. Cole sat on a gurney with a blanket folded neat, staring at nothing. A small square of adhesive gleamed at his neck. "You okay?" she asked. He focused with effort. "I lost time," he said. "How much?" "Enough." She felt the anger rise and set like a quick, hard tide. "Listen," she said, voice low. "If they clip you in and you feel a push, you pull yourself back to the stock. Pick one real object. The crack in the paint, the scratch on your bolt. Name it. Anchor there." He tried a smile. "Old school anchor." "Old works," she said. On her way back, she cut through a maintenance corridor and almost ran into Mercer. He looked like he'd been running even if he hadn't. "They flagged your access after the cutoff," he said. "If you touch certain terminals, an alert goes straight to command." "Then I won't touch them," she said. "You will," he said, and handed her a folded schematic. "There's a data core under Sector Delta. Air-gapped except for timed replication. If you want the truth to exist tomorrow, copy it tonight." Nat read the diagram while she walked. "And after?" "After," he said, "you decide if you're an instructor or a witness." She put the paper in her sleeve with the drive. "I'm a soldier," she said. "Same thing on good days." Rourke intercepted her outside the dorms. He didn't ask what she carried. "You planning something reckless or necessary?" "Both," she said. "I'm not losing a kid to a menu option." He looked past her at the dark trees pressed against the fence line. "There's weather coming," he said. "Storm line hits us near midnight. Cameras hate hard rain." She heard the gift inside the weather report. "Copy," she said. He stepped closer. "If this goes loud, I can't save your paper trail." "I'm not writing one," she said. "Good," he said. "Because they'll write theirs." The storm crawled in after lights out, a slow drum on the roof that built into a hard, even roar. Nat moved when the sound filled the hallways and ate the footsteps. She wore black kit without patches, badge deep in a pocket, the schematic in her head. A camera blinked red above the elevator. She took the service stairs. Mercer's code slid one door, an old trick slid another. Sector Delta breathed cold, server stacks glowing with the soft confidence of machines that believe they'll be left alone. She found the core behind a panel with a lock that was supposed to be clever. She wasn't in the mood to be impressed. She seated the drive and watched the screen spill names, dates, overrides, command hooks, neural maps with tags that didn't belong in any range. Subject, 03. Subject, 11. Subject, 31. Cole's number blinked up from the list like a flare. She wanted to scroll, to read, to understand the architecture of every theft. Instead she let the copy run and listened to the storm pound the world flat. Somewhere above, a door clicked with that half-second delay. Somewhere else, a guard coughed and pretended it was nothing. The progress bar crawled. When it hit 60, an alarm chirped once and cut. When it hit 89, the room leaned with a surge and steadied. When it hit 100, she pulled the drive and killed the monitor. She left no extra breath in the air. On the way up, she saw Rourke in a shadow at the end of the hall that wasn't supposed to have anyone in it. He didn't move. She didn't either. Then he touched 2 fingers to his forehead like a man wiping rain and walked away without a sound. Back in her barracks, she sat on the edge of the bunk with the drive in her fist and the storm coming apart into slower drops. She knew the next step before she admitted it. Data wasn't enough. Systems survive shame. They don't survive exposure with proof. To send this out, she'd need a tower with reach. The facility had one, cut to internal nets and guarded by policy and pride. She lay back on the pillow and stared at the dark ceiling. Inside, the quiet still had rules. Outside, the mountain wrote louder ones. Tomorrow, she'd pick which voice to follow. When dawn finally pushed a pale stripe through the blue ridge, Nat had already chosen. She tucked the drive in a sealed pouch at her vest, laced her boots, and walked out like she belonged to the hallway. The facility smelled like wet concrete and disinfectant after the storm. A tech wheeled a cart past without looking up. Mercer watched from a doorway and didn't wave. Rourke stood at the end of the corridor like a question he wasn't going to ask. Wind shifts at noon, he said, as if they were back on a range. You'll have 10 minutes clear on the tower before the system checks itself. Copy, she said. You didn't hear that from me. I didn't. She moved in daylight because daylight wears a mask everyone expects. Clipboard in hand. Instructor badge face out. Small talk when required, silence when better. The comms tower sat on a fenced knoll above the main block, a slim spine of steel with dishes angled at the sky. Internal only by design, but the repeater panel could be repurposed long enough to shove a truth into the world. Mercer had scribbled a bypass on a napkin like it was a recipe. She memorized it and burned the paper in a coffee cup. At 11:57, clouds thinned. A slant of blue showed through like permission. Nat took the service path up the knoll. The gate code worked because the gate trusted badges more than intentions. Inside the control shack, dust floated in bars of thin light. She locked the door, cracked the panel, and unscrewed a plate that didn't want to move. The board underneath hummed steady. Her hands didn't shake. She seated the drive, keyed Mercer's sequence, found the uplink test channel, and watched a dead screen wake like an eye. A progress line appeared, 2%, 9%, 18, she heard boots on gravel outside. Voices. Routine cadence. She kept the upload running and reached for her sidearm. A knock hit the door that pretended to be friendly. Maintenance inspection, a voice called. Another voice said something about a ticket. Nat stared at the bar climbing, 31, 42, and didn't answer. The handle turned. It was locked. A radio rasped. She heard Whitfield's name like a cold blade. She pulled the emergency latch on the external ladder hatch, swung it up, and slid onto the rungs just as the main door kicked. The ladder jolted. She climbed, boots biting steel, shoulders burning. Below, 2 guards burst in and shouted. Above, the wind widened. She clipped to the safety line, half for the fall, half for the look of it from the ground. Halfway up, a siren tripped, facility wide, mechanical, and joyless. She reached the top platform, wrenched open the relay cab, and saw the upload mirrored on a secondary panel, 67, 74, 81. A shot snapped past the dish and took a chip of paint from the rail. Really, she muttered, and ducked. She worked the line with her left hand while her right kept her pistol aimed at the ladder mouth. A helmet rose, then a visor. She fired a warning to the rung below it. The helmet vanished. The bar hit 92. Lieutenant Cross, Whitfield's voice cut through a rooftop speaker Nat hadn't noticed. Smooth. Unbothered. Stand down. You're making a category error. This is internal oversight. Nat didn't answer. We're refining courage, Whitfield continued. We're removing the waste between decision and defense. You, of all people, should understand. 96, 97. Last chance, Whitfield said. Hand me the drive and I'll write you a narrative you can live with. Nat thought of Robert on the frost line telling her not to fight the wind, agree with what's true. She looked at the sky and let the wind move her hair. No, she said, and pulled the final confirm. 100 flashed green. Uplink complete. A round slammed the control box and showered sparks. Power dipped, then returned in a dirty brown. Nat ripped the drive, pocketed it, and swung off the platform into the wind, grabbing the ladder hard enough to jam her shoulder. She slid 3 rungs, stopped, and dropped faster than bullets could guess, boots thundering on steel. She hit the shack roof, rolled, and hit gravel running. Guards yelled. One reached for her arm, she bounced him off the fence with a twist and a knee. Another came from the left, she cut an angle and let him eat the slope. She was off the knoll and under the trees in seconds, heart steady, lungs tight but not panicked. The facility shifted. You could feel it, a hive realizing a hand had knocked the honey loose. Doors slammed. Locks thudded. A klaxon changed pitch. Rourke appeared from behind a generator house and fell in beside her, pace matched. Tell me you got it, he said. It's gone, she said. Somewhere it hurts. Good. He handed her a small cylinder. EMP. 1 shot. Use it like a period. They cut through a maintenance yard toward Sector Delta because that's where the pain would start for Specterline, the data core which believed in its own immortality. Mercer met them at the service stairs with his face 2 shades paler than morning. They're pulling the hard kill switch, he said. If they can't keep it, they'll erase it. Not today, Nat said. They slid into Delta, cold air, red lights pulsing like a slow heartbeat. At the far end, 2 security operators typed with the desperation of men who know the timeline. I need 40 seconds, Mercer said, already at a terminal he shouldn't have owned. 30, Rourke said, covering the door. Nat wedged herself between 2 racks, watched a delete queue race across a screen, and felt the kind of anger that refines into clarity. She thumbed the EMP, counted the cadence of the server fans, and waited for the queue to hit the block marked core index. Now, Mercer said. Nat lobbed the EMP into the aisle and turned away as it thumped low and full. The lights hiccuped. The delete queue froze like a statue mid-fall. 1 operator slammed a reset, the board refused to wake. Rourke grinned without humor. Period, he said. Exfil, Nat answered. They didn't make it clean. A squad cut them off near the junction. Not guards, candidates in full kit with the harness plates welded under their suits. Cole was among them, eyes wrong again, jaw slack in that tiny way Nat had learned to hate. Cole, she said, voice flat but human. Anchor. His muzzle lifted toward her chest like a magnet finding north. Rourke raised his rifle. Don't, Nat snapped. She stepped right, forced his muzzle to track, and gave him the smallest target, her eyes. Find the scratch on your bolt, she said. The phrase slid into the place where habits live. A flick. A flinch. Cole blinked hard. The harness vibed. He winced. They're in my hands, he breathed. Take them back, she said. The squad shifted. One fired a short, panicked burst. Rourke shoved Nat down, returned 2 surgical rounds into armor plates not designed for close. Mercer yanked a fire alarm that dumped foam into the hall, turned the air into a white roar. Nat grabbed Cole's harness, jammed her thumb under a latch, and tore. The plate sparked and popped. Cole slumped like a man who'd been holding a mountain. "Move," she barked, and he moved. The other candidates hesitated just long enough for Rourke to pull them past the junction. They ran. Doors tried to close, Mercer shortcut the locks. Sirens screamed. Overhead, Whitfield's voice went colder. "Subject 7 is rogue. Lethal authorization granted." "That's you," Rourke said. "I gathered," Nat said. They broke into the loading bay as the storm found its second life. Rain sheeted sideways, turning the yard into a mirror. Trucks idled with drivers staring at clipboards that suddenly didn't matter. Nat, Rourke, Cole, Mercer cut for the fence line. Spotlights knifed the dark. Someone fired from a tower and chewed gravel by Nat's boot. She didn't look back. At the corner where the fence kissed rock, Rourke dropped a shaped charge the size of a sandwich, clicked it, and turned his face. The blast slapped the night open. They dove through the torn wire and slid down the wet slope into the trees where the world forgot to be straight. They ran until the sirens became an idea instead of a sound. They stopped where a creek argued with stones. Rourke checked his shoulder and swore softly when his hand came away red. Mercer sat on a log and shook like a man who'd been cold for years. Cole leaned on a tree and stared at his hands like they belonged to a stranger returning home. Nat crouched, unsealed the pouch, and looked at the drive like it was both a weapon and a witness. "It's out," she said. "But they'll rewrite me before lunch." Rourke nodded once. "Then we stay ahead of the story." "Cold Creek," Nat said. "West Gate, old roads. A man who knows how to disappear people." Mercer looked up. "Miller? Or his cousin in Wyoming," she said. "We ride freight if we have to." Cole swallowed. "What am I in this?" "Alive," Nat said. "That's the job for now." Wind moved through the pines like a low chorus. Far behind them, Specterline howled at an empty knoll and a dead core. Ahead, the mountain thinned, the sky widened, and a road nobody used anymore waited for boots that had chosen their voice. By dusk they reached the old highway, a cracked ribbon that led them west. No headlights. No chatter. They moved like people who trusted silence more than plans. At a truck stop 2 towns later, Nat bought a map with cash and circled a path that ducked patrols. Rourke wrapped his shoulder tight. Mercer stayed close to Cole like a man guarding a hard drive with legs. By morning they rolled into Wyoming under a sky that looked honest and a town that didn't ask questions. Cold Creek was one street, a diner, a garage, and a few houses that had learned to shrug at the wind. The garage door read Miller's in letters that had given up on fresh paint. Inside, the air smelled like oil and rain dirt. The man behind the counter looked up, took in their faces, and didn't reach for a phone. "You need parts or you need to be gone?" he asked. "Both," Nat said. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Name's not Miller anymore," he said. "But the trade's the same." He slid a metal box across the counter. It was full of old IDs, burner phones, train timetables. "Pick quick," he said. "You've got a shadow on your tail." The radio behind him proved it. "Fugitive update," the anchor said. "Natalie Cross, former Navy sniper, wanted in connection with the destruction of a federal facility in Virginia." Words like armed and unstable fell out of the speaker with practiced calm. Cole flinched and looked at Nat. She didn't blink. "They'll call me anything," she said. "We give them something else to say." The something else was the drive and a signal strong enough to carry it. Mercer had a short list of towers that could ride and upload past whoever thought they owned the air. One of them sat near the New Mexico line, tied to a base that liked the dark, Silverfield Air Base. "Phase 2 staging," Mercer said, tapping a faded map. "Hardware, data mirrors, command relay. You hit Silverfield, you hit the spine." 4 people against a base, Rourke said. "We need more than nerve." Nat nodded. She switched on a phone that wasn't supposed to exist and sent a packet to a handle that did. The reply came in one line, "We see you. Stay small." Coordinates followed. Ghostwire wasn't a person. It was a net, and tonight the net was ready to pull. They rode freight to the border in a boxcar that smelled like grain and old sun. Cole slept for an hour like a kid who'd outrun a nightmare. Rourke stared at the seam of light under the door and kept count of the couplers with his good hand. Mercer went through the drive again and again like a priest touching a book he couldn't read out loud. When they dropped off near a scrub field, three shapes stepped out of the dark. No names, no questions. One handed Nat a sat phone and a list of frequencies. Another passed Cole a clean plate carrier. The third nodded at Rourke, saw the shoulder, and gave him a sling and a smirk. "You still shoot lefty?" he asked. Rourke smirked back. "When I have to." They staged in a cut of dry riverbed 2 miles from Silverfield's fence. The base wrote itself in lines of sodium light and long shadows. Drones pivoted slow over the apron. AC-17 slept with its nose in a hangar. The tower blinked red at the sky like a quiet metronome. Nat laid the plan in 10 sentences. No pep talk. No drama. "We only need the relay," she said. "Everything else is noise." Rourke and a Ghostwire pair would cut power to the perimeter cameras for 90 seconds. Mercer and Cole would breach a side door on the comms block with a code that shouldn't work and would. Nat would climb. If the window closed, they'd run before the base remembered how to spell their names. They moved when the wind steadied. Rourke's team ghosted along the fence and cracked the panel with a bite that sounded like a soda can sighing. Lights blinked, hesitated, returned at half strength. Good enough. Mercer's code gave up the door like it had been lonely. Inside, air that tasted like refrigerant and policy. Cole killed a hallway camera with a cap of spray. Mercer led them to the relay room with a confidence he wore like borrowed clothes. Nat peeled off toward the external ladder, counted breaths, and went up. On the roof, the air bit colder. The dish whirred lazy. She popped the casing and found the port that had no right to be there. The drive slid home the way it wanted to. On her ear, Mercer counted files like a man listening to a heartbeat. 1, 2, 5, 9, "We're in," he said. "Keep it clean." The progress bar lived again. She watched numbers climb and watched the base feel it. A siren chirped once, confused. Boots hit gravel below and then decided to look somewhere else. 42, 51, 63. Inside, Rourke's voice cut on. "Company." Nat saw them first, 2 fast movers from the west perimeter, visors down, rifles up, the kind of response that isn't loud until it is. She stayed in profile behind the dish and held. 74, 81. One guard keyed a radio. The other scanned the roofline. She put a round into the gravel at his boot. He danced a step, swore, peeked, and waited. "Cross," Rourke said, "we're at the line." "Hold 5, she said. 92, 97. A new voice lit the net like a flare. "Whitfield. Terminate the breach. Asset 7 is on site." They had a new title for her now. "Almost," Mercer said, teeth in the word. "Don't breathe." Nat let the last pixels drum in. 100 landed with a soft tone that felt louder than any alarm. "Sent," Mercer said. "Mirrors everywhere. They can't stuff this back." The first shot came a heartbeat later, aimed high and hot. Nat slid down the ladder 3 rungs and dropped the rest, landing hard enough to jar her teeth. "Exfil," she said, already moving. Inside, Cole and Mercer sealed the relay door with a bar and a wish. Rourke met them at the corner, eyes sharp, sling tight. They cut through a maintenance yard and back to the breach, Ghostwire already peeling the fence like a zipper. Sirens finally remembered how to wail. A drone swung and threw a cone of light that washed the yard white. Nat led them under it at a dead angle the spotlight couldn't love. They hit the wash and ran till the base shrank into a bad story. Ghostwire's pickup waited without headlights. They tumbled in and lay on the steel, lungs burning. No one spoke until the engine had traded the fence for scrub and the scrub for county road. Mercer laughed first, a short break in the tension that sounded like a cough. "It's out," he said. "Everything. Command hooks, override logs, Whitfield sign-offs. They're clean language, our dirty proof. Journalists will get it. Oversight will get it. Allies will get it. Even the people who hate us will get it. That's the point." On the sat phone, messages started popping like rain on a tin roof. Feed received. Validating. Mirror up. Stand by. One more voice came through, text only, name noted. Debt owed. Nat set the phone down. Rourke leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Cole looked at his hands again and didn't look lost this time. "What now?" he asked. "We keep moving," Nat said. "They'll push a counter-story by morning." They did more than push. At sunrise, every screen in a diner 50 miles away showed Whitfield at a podium spelling words like sabotage and treason. The audio was clean. The crawl was ugly. Then the feed cut to files no podium could survive. Graphs, commands, clips from inside rooms that weren't supposed to be shown. Faces blurred. Signatures not. The anchor couldn't find the script for a long 10 seconds. When he did, his voice had changed. Cold Creek texted one line to the number in Nat's pocket, "You're hot. Do not come back." She thumbed a reply she didn't send. Rourke paid the check and left too much cash. Mercer folded his hands like a prayer he didn't believe in yet. Cole watched the door like trouble owed them money. Nat stood in the parking lot and felt the first small break in a pressure that had lived under her ribs for weeks. "Resolution isn't peace," Rourke said beside her. "It's room. We'll take room," she said. "Then we take breath." A freight horn blew somewhere far south, long and low. The road ahead wasn't clean. It never would be. But behind them, a machine that thought it could live without choosing had just met daylight. Nat tightened her pack and walked toward the next mile. They kept the car moving county to county, never sleeping in the same place twice. News caught up and then tripped over itself. Files spread. Oversight committees called emergency sessions. A senator asked for names on live TV and got them. Whitfield's face faded from the podium and reappeared under a headline that didn't match her press release. The language changed from innovation to violation. Specterline shut its gates and posted guards to keep cameras out. It didn't help. Too many mirrors. Too many copies. The story had left the building. Ghostwire used the noise the way divers use air. They routed the data to allies who didn't like each other but liked control even less. Military lawyers surfaced like fish that had smelled blood. Mercer gave a closed-door statement with hands that shook only after he finished talking. He did not try to make himself clean. He said what he built, what he warned, what they ignored. When they asked why he helped, he said, because they stopped asking if a person was still a person. That line made it into 3 reports and a headline that carried farther than he expected. Cole sat through his own interviews. He didn't dress it up. He talked about losing time and getting it back. He said the anchor trick out loud so other shooters could hear it. He told them to pick one real thing in the room and hold it with their eyes. He didn't blame the shooters who couldn't do it. He blamed the signal. After the last meeting, he walked out a little taller. The scar at his neck stayed the color of old copper. He touched it less each day. Rourke stayed at Nat's shoulder through the worst of the storm. Then an order came down that smelled like a soft exit. Advisor relieved. Pending reassignment. They laughed at the same time, then they didn't. You going to take it? She asked. I'll let them think I did, he said. Then I'll teach somewhere nobody writes brochures. He shifted his sling and winced. The shoulder would never be perfect. He didn't need it to be. You could come with me, he said. There's a range with no badge readers. She looked past him at a map taped to a motel wall, Alaska cut clean against blue. I think I need quiet that isn't owned by anyone, she said. He nodded once, the way he did when he agreed and hated it. Charges landed where they were supposed to. Not all of them stuck, but enough did. Whitfield took a plea that kept her out of sight and out of uniform. A few officers resigned before anyone could say fired. A few more tried to move laterally and found every door closed. Specterline's buildings went dark in public. In private, parts of it tried to slither into other projects with new names. Ghostwire watched the budgets like hawks. When the money shifted, the files did too. It became a game of inches and patience was the one thing Nat had never run out of. Cold Creek sent one last message, roads clear. No tab. Mercer found a teaching post under another name, a lab with walls that didn't hum. He started every class with an empty whiteboard and a rule about consent that sounded like policy but lived like a promise. Cole joined a unit that didn't love the spotlight and didn't own any harness plates. He sent Nat a single photo from a range at sunset. No caption. She understood. Rourke mailed her a patch he had cut from an old vest. It was just a rectangle of fabric with sun-bleached thread. No motto. No skull. She kept it in a pocket she didn't use for anything else. Nat went north. The flight into Anchorage felt like stepping out of a noise that had tried to live under her skin. A small plane took her farther, then a truck, then her own boots. Aurora Ridge wasn't on a brochure. It was cold and clean and busy with weather. She rented a small cabin and fixed what broke. She ran in the mornings and shot in the afternoons, not for a score, not for a call sign. She shot because it was the one place her head lined up with her hands and the day felt honest. She kept a radio on the table, tuned to a band that carried Ghostwire when it needed her. Weeks went by without a beep. Then one would come. She would listen, give an answer if it helped, refuse if it didn't. She didn't owe the world every shot. Sometimes the past came up the trail in different shoes. A hiker who recognized her from a screen and didn't know what to say. A reporter who found the road by guessing. She kept it simple. I'm not your story, she said, and closed the door in a way that didn't need an argument. Other times the past called as a voice she trusted. Rourke from a pay phone with wind in the line. Cole on a secure app, asking nothing, sending coordinates for a hunt that wasn't about deer. Mercer with a shaky joke about retirement that didn't take. They didn't drag her back. They asked, and if she said no, they left it there. Winter taught her a schedule. Chop wood. Check roof. Mind the stove. Clean the rifle. Count the stars when the sky let you. The aurora came and went like a slow curtain. She didn't write about it. She didn't take a picture the first time. She stood there and let the cold tell her the same thing every good range had told her, breathe, then choose. On the worst nights, when old shots lined up like names she couldn't shake, she remembered Robert's voice the way you remember a road home. Don't fight the wind. Read it, then agree with what's true. She would breathe and let the names sit where they had to sit. Not trophies. Not ghosts. Just facts. Spring broke the ice in a hurry. The radio clicked 3 times and carried a short file name that only she and 4 others would recognize. Not a crisis. A checkpoint. Someone had tried to rebrand a bad idea with a friendlier font. She went to the table, opened a map, and wrote 3 notes in a hand that had learned not to shake. Then she sent them and put the radio back to quiet. Outside, meltwater ran hard enough to sound like a crowd. She laced her boots and walked the ridge. She didn't think of herself as a legend. Legends lived in rooms with curtains and speeches. She thought of herself as someone who learned to listen before pulling the trigger, and then kept listening after. Precision hadn't been power. It had been patience. And patience had given her a life that didn't ask her to prove she deserved it. She would help when it mattered. She would say no when it didn't. She would keep the shot for when it mattered most. That evening she took the rifle to the crest and sat prone in clean snow. The valley held still. Wind rolled off the ridge in a slow, even push. She read it and agreed. She squeezed once at a steel plate she'd hung against a rock. The sound came back honest and small. She smiled, not for triumph, just for alignment. Down in the cabin a kettle began to sing. She stood, slung the rifle, and headed home, boots riding a straight line in a field that didn't need witnesses. The world would keep trying to move the line. She would keep staking it down. When the next hard shot came, she would make it count.